February 17th architecture meeting. We have a small group today, and both our fearless leaders were not able to attend, Steve Taylor and Sergio. So on that note, we're going to go through what we can, and Udcart, I am going to rely on you to fill in any gaps that we might have here. I do know some of the things that are going on, but not quite as much as I should. So on that, here's the general discussion from last week, 2 weeks ago. So we'll just start at the top here. I know that this has been an area that we all have been focused on, and Udcart looks like you had some work you were doing on that 3D bar chart. Is there anything you need to update us on with that?
Yeah, so the progress was we were able to isolate the sample example that was there on the website, and we also created the HTML file for that. So right now what we are trying to identify the what labels, what data we need to like basically we need an API to feed that chart. So Steve has sent me a couple of pointers around which I can plot sample data for various components and components having various deployments, and with that data I can try that charts if they are getting populated perfectly.
I know he showed me one kind of 3D bar chart that I thought was pretty cool, and it showed kind of for an application which components had the most change in them. Are you guys thinking about doing any kind of a 3D chart of any kind to represent the transitive, what I call transitive microservices? So if we're pulling info from the JSON file on what microservices a microservice may depend on, and that's in the it's in the basically part of the SBOM. Have you guys started talking about showing any of that?
Yeah, it was there in the initial discussion that we had, something like a tree map kind of thing, wherein we will have various components on the very first layer, and when we get deep dive into a single component, we can identify what all dependencies are there for that component. So that was there in the initial discussion, but we have taken out these two types of chart for now for plotting our deployment data.
Yeah. And have you guys looked at how Datadogs displays that data? Because they've got some pretty cool graphics, and they display a lot of data. It is more hierarchical, I think, and I think the 3D stuff is starting to make more sense for these really complicated dependency maps, because they get pretty complicated. But Datadogs has got some pretty cool stuff. Some of it looks like, it's like one little point and then it explodes out, so it can be hard to see. I always thought it would be really cool to have VR reports.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do a POC on that as well, because this is like initial stage. We haven't done any concrete yet, so that would be a great point to explore.
And VR is going to become more and more popular, so everybody's going to eventually. Some companies I've spoken to are starting to buy VR headsets for all of their employees. They're starting to do VR meetings, so they're starting to use the metaverse now to hold meetings, and apparently it's pretty interesting. I've heard different stories about the meetings, but apparently it makes you feel more like you're all in the same room. So it might be something that, a few of us, if we want to buy the VR headsets, we might play with it and see what it's like. There was a company in Santa Fe that I think Ericsson had invested in, and they were doing nothing but building out VR reports, or really complicated reports. So I'm hoping that someday our 3D bar charts actually grow into VR reports. There's a lot of data, and if you could see it in a more time space, it would be very interesting.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know, this conversation, I'm not sure what we were going on with CubeSec. I do know what we've been doing with Aspen Mesh. I don't know, Steve, I have reached out to the CTO of Aspen Mesh. They're pretty interested in the stuff that we're doing. and they do have an interest in us potentially being able to route to them the logical application. So you could literally, a deployment would no longer be pushing even in a GitOps world, all of that would go away, because you would just load up the microservices into your cluster, and then we would push to or Ortelius would push over to Aspen Mesh the application configurations, and they would route those configurations to the correct individuals. So let's say you had a cluster that was running dev, and then you could Aspen Mesh could switch it from dev to test just by rerouting which microservices the application, the versions that they're using. So deployment would really be a call to Aspen Mesh to reroute to a different version of microservice. Now, they know that can't be, that may be difficult with a mono database, but the more we get into poly databases, the more likely that could happen. And I think they're starting to look at what that would look like in a true decomposed kind of architecture. Value stream, either one of you have any updates on that, or should we have any chat about it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I want to jump down to this one, and since I'm running this meeting today, this is probably what I think is one of the most important things. Arvin, does Steve have you researching or do you have any task at hand right now?
No.
You want to take a look at this?
Okay.
And you don't need to take a look at it from any perspective except how to use it. So oops, I didn't need to do that. Cookiecutter. So
I think it's for making a template.
It is, exactly.
A starter project.
So we have to see Ortelius is microservice catalogs come in 3 chunks. And I just recently wrote a white paper on this. I'm happy to send it out. I think I should just send it out to everybody. There's one section that is one category of catalogs are like Backstage. Backstage focuses on setting up your microservice development environment and tracks all the tools you're working with and who you are. So you register it to the Backstage platform and define all the tools, kind of like we have in our services where you can show the CVEs, the Swagger, and they have a lot more that they've connected to it, like the Vault or like the secrets. Then there's what we're doing, which is really trying to track the life cycle of a microservice and relate it back to the versions of the applications so that we have a better understanding of what we're moving into and what we're managing in these environments. So we're tracking the versioning and the inventory. And then there's the far side. So there's the dev side, and then the ops side are the tools that are tracking service level objectives. And they're looking at tools like Prometheus. They're looking at how the service is performing and pulling that back in. They also do ownership, but they don't do versioning. They're just talking about SLOs. What Cookiecutter could do for us, there's 2 ways that we could go about this. We could use Cookiecutter to create templates in a similar way that Backstage does. Or we could just integrate with Backstage. So part of our challenge is adoption. I've talked about this for quite some time. How do we get developers excited about registering their microservice? Well, one way to do that is to provide them this kind of a service where they have the template. So they're motivated to register their service because when they do so, they're going to get something for it. They're going to get their template for their project. We could integrate with Cookiecutter to do that. So there would be a piece of it that we would say, once you register your service, what Cookiecutter template do you want to use? And when they select that, we'd let Cookiecutter generate that. The other way would be to go ahead and look at Backstage and let Backstage be the collection point and we pull that data from Backstage into our environment. Or we even just have a link to Backstage that says, if you want more information, click on Backstage, and it takes you back to that information. But we would take the initial base version of the microservice or the container from Backstage and start it from that way. So we have to have a better way of priming the pump, because what we're not serving is the people we care about the most, which are the developers. We're not making it easy, or we're not making it clear why they should register a microservice, and tools like Backstage have done a really good job of doing that. Now, we have competitors who right now are using Cookiecutter to do this, so I think it's a good possibility. So this is, Arvin, this would be a really good project for you, just to sit down and learn to use Cookiecutter. How to, even it's just for Python package templating. I believe that we can do, we could probably create any kind of a template, but right now I think we should just look to see how it works. And that's it. That's all you'd have to do, is just give us a good idea of how Cookiecutter, is, how it would work and how we might be able to integrate it.
Tracy, the Backstage that you're talking about, is that helps writing SLIs, service layer indicators and objectives?
I don't know. So here's Backstage. It is also it's incubating at the CNCF. I think it's about to graduate. It's got a lot of adoption. Developers really, really love it. They don't really consider themselves a catalog. It says a centralized software catalog. So I guess they do consider themselves. They've changed I think the messaging around it. But before, the real point of it is to go register your microservice. This was written by Spotify, and they had a problem with standardizing on the life cycle of every microservice. So they wanted to force developers, or not force them, but give them the standard ones that they should use. And this is how this got started. So I feel like if there are APIs that we could pull this information that they already have about the base version of the microservice, that we could potentially then just integrate with Backstage and then manage all of the back-end pieces, all of the versioning, all the inventory, all of the environment changes. And that might be a healthy way to go, considering I would consider it a sister project, since we're both in the Linux Foundation. It would make sense for us to integrate at this level. So we have two roads we could go down to solve this, and I think that integrating it with Backstage might be easier than building it out with Cookiecutter. But Arvin, I would say this would be a really good research project for you to kind of get started on. And if you want to take a look at Backstage as well and learn a little bit about Backstage, that would be a good project for you as well. No heavy coding required, just learn the product for the time being.
Yeah, I will do that. I will offload the both, the Cookiecutter and the Backstage.
Okay. Arvin research. Backstage. I'll call it front end integration. Because if we had, to be honest, if we had a good integration with Backstage, we could then reach out to the Backstage folks, show them what we're doing with their data. And I believe that they would get pretty excited about it, and they might even help with building more integrations and work between the two products. Because we're both doing something very different in terms of what we provide to the end users. Okay, this is something not for any of us. This is Sergio and Steve's job. They have to get this done soon, because I need to get a blog post out about our I'm going to add this point, our hackathon for March and April. And we have already extended this meeting and the one later in the afternoon to an hour and a half for March and April. Extended architecture meeting to 1.5 for co-coding events. And I did meet a really awesome person yesterday, and I hope that he joins. He's been doing Java, and he's Udcart. He's got more of your background in terms of he's got a lot of heavy. He's a really good, strong coder. He's got a lot of experience, and he's been doing some teaching. So I encouraged him to potentially get involved in our project, so we could add some more people who can help others do coding. Because I know that you have. I know that Sasha has to some extent. I know that Steve has, but I feel like we need more people who can help with the coding because it's some of our Java stuff is pretty ugly, and you have to really have a background in Java to do it. But some of this new stuff, for example, Arvin, if we did an integration to Backstage, we would do that in a microservice. You would write that just in a separate microservice to create that integration. And it could be done in Python. Here. I should add this. Find this. Okay. All right. I think that's probably a good plan, and that's why I was reaching out to more people who have the background for teaching, that they might be able to get involved in the hackathon as somebody who could help teach. Pujar I haven't seen him, but I know that he's working with Steve on a regular basis because I see emails from them. He's continuing to kind of automate our test cases. I know that this time, and that's the same with Aisha. Aisha is still working on doing some work around lib years. I'm not really sure what that tool is, but I know Steve has an interest in it because of the SBOM, additional SBOM information we can pull from it. So I know that they're still working together on that. And other than that, those are all of the updates that I have. And the GitOps guys, that's the other thing I should note for this team. GitOps. So Ujwal, Reddy, and Brad McCoy are working on I would call it a rollout template for using Ortelius and Argo. What Ujwal wants to do is be able to come up with a standard plan and documentation for going about doing that. He runs a consulting organization, and he would like to take that plan and take it to potential customers who are trying to manage a lot of microservices, and they want to do something around GitOps. So he's working on, the two of them are working on that as well. So Brad claims that they're pretty close to doing they've kind of got a POC together, and that team is growing. Brad has recruited over the last month, he's recruited about 10 additional people to work on this. So that GitOps model is moving forward, and I think it already has the integration to Argo. And if you want more on that topic, watch the, what do you call it? We'll call it the afternoon architecture. All notes. And they're recording all of that, so if anybody's interested, you can always watch what they're doing. And if you're interested in getting involved in this, Ujwal and Brad and Steve just started talking about it, and I'm happy to make sure you're added to any of those meetings, and we probably should we should start recording those as well. So, it's kind of like, and this is what we've been learning from the Jenkins community. If there's something that you're interested in doing and you want to go do it, nobody's going to get in your way. And this is something that Ujwal is passionate about, and Brad is as well, because he wants to see some adoption. So they've started to go off and work on that together. All right. That's the only thing I can think of that I might have missed. Anything else?
I think we covered most of the things that were there.
Okay, great. All right, gentlemen, then I will jump off and give you the rest of your evenings back.
Yeah, I will see you in the 2 hours.
Okay, and if you
The-
have, and Arvin, if you have questions about this, about Cookiecutter, just reach out to me and I'm happy to work through it with you. But I think if you
yeah,
just put your head into it, you'll be fine.
I will ask you if got stuck.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, gentlemen.